Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Trading Coach Podcast. In today's episode, I'm going to share with you a conversation that we recently had in our live trading room. But I want to start off by giving you a little bit of background. Before we get into that, I just want to say this. Thank you so much for all the support you guys have given the show. Spotify sent me this little kind of year 2020 recap, and there were so many cool stats about how many people were reaching in different countries and how many hours you're listening to and where I ranked in the world as far as podcasting. And I'm big in the UK, 36th, which is pretty cool. And just a big thank you for that. And if you want to continue supporting the show, there's two things you can do. One, just share it, share your experiences, share the episodes that you like, share it with your friends. If you have someone that you know that is interested in getting into trading or just the other stuff that I talk about, just empowerment, motivation, financial freedom, all that fun stuff, just give them a link to the podcast, give them your favorite episode, tell them to check it out, and also leave me a rating and a review on your favorite podcasting app. Apparently that helps massively. I don't know, but that's what people keep telling me to say to you guys. So do that. Now, the conversation we're going to talk about is about news. And to give you guys some perspective of what happened, we were in our live trading room. We were analyzing the markets as we usually do. And we started to see a fair amount of movement across the board. And one of our traders typed in, he said, hey, we're watching it was a yen pair, the dollar yen. We just finished up with that pair. He said, did any news come out? Because we're seeing a pretty big candle. And we looked into it and we saw a significant amount of move on the yen pairs at the time and eventually on some other pairs as well. And what I did was I went to a few sources to kind of just see if anything came out. There was nothing scheduled for the time, but if anything, the Trump tweet era has taught us that news can come from anywhere at any time in this kind of 24-hour news cycle. So I went on Twitter, I went on forexlive.com and checked things, and there's nothing that stood out. So we gave it a little bit of thought, and you'll hear about that. Apologies, my kids in the background, virtual school, but you'll hear about that in the conversation. But in general, I'm not a news person, right? I'm not a fundamental trader. I'm a technical trader. I came from the background of news is completely bogus. Only worry about what's on the charts. And although that's still true, right? My strategy is based off of technical analysis. I've made the effort over the years to really start understanding the fundamental side a little bit better. And that's for two reasons. One, in the position that I'm in as a trading coach, and a lot of my friends look at me as this financial guy, right? Even though they have no idea what I do. I stare at charts and little candlesticks all day, but apparently I'm supposed to know the answer to these worldwide economic questions. So one was to kind of put myself in a position to at least kind of be familiar with the questions that they're asking and give them some type of feedback, tell them, hey, I'm not a fundamental expert, but this and this means this and typically this, that, but also understand it from a trading perspective, right? I do come from an investing background where I don't want to say I used fundamental news or fundamental approach in my stock investing, but it was more of that than the technicals. And just understanding the concept of longer term positions, being aware of the fundamentals in the currency market or just in the general, in the economic market, financial markets in general, it has provided me some edges in the past with when I'm shooting for big moves. So when there are times when the fundamental bias and the technical bias line up, I could be a little bit more, I hate to say, a little bit more greedy, a little bit more aggressive, with what I'm looking for in the market. And that has paid off pretty good in the past. And I haven't had any big home run trades this year in the currency market, but I'm sure that will happen again in the future. But my approach to understanding fundamentals wasn't buying a course. It wasn't necessarily reading books. It was the same approach that I kind of preach to the traders I work with as far as learning, right? Reps and review, right? I always challenge them every day or, depending on how much time you have, at least, a certain period during the week, start doing reviews, right? Review your trading day. This is no different than when I was an athlete and you review your game film, you review your practice film. That's how you get better. You look at what happened in the play, you look at how you did, you look for ways that you can improve, and then you try to implement that as you continue to progress. And we do the same thing with technical analysis. We review our day, we look at the opportunities we took, we looked at opportunities that we liked but we couldn't took, we look at random charts of random opportunities and practice making predictions. Hey, I would have done this here, or hey, I think we're going to do that there. And it's just repetition, repetition, repetition. We can do the same thing with news, right? You look at a news event, right? In hindsight, after it came out, you look at a news event or maybe a specific time in the market where you saw movement, and you look to see if there was any news event that correlated to that movement. And you start putting two and two together, right? You start seeing kind of what the flow of the market is. For example, right? The market values news differently during different market conditions. When I first started trading around, right after, during, in the middle of the what's called the Great Recession, back like in that 2009, 2010 area, right? Coming out of that, or during that and coming out of it, the biggest, baddest news event on the block was the non-farm payroll, right? This is the monthly jobs number, unemployment claims, all that average hourly earnings, all that stuff that comes out. And this was a hot point in the market would move egregiously every single first Friday based on this number because everyone was getting laid off, unemployment rates were super high, all that fun stuff, right? So every news event that came out during the week or weeks leading up to it that basically allowed people to make predictions about the non-farm payroll ended up being important. So put it like this. Imagine the non-farm payroll being the big thing, right? The market's not necessarily looking at the big thing because by the time the big thing comes, it's too late, right? So what you're looking for is the little things that allow you to make predictions about the big things so that you can position yourself before the big thing happens so that when the big thing happens, you're already kind of you're already in the market. And then when it happens, you can capitalize off it and make profit and not get caught up in all the people or with everyone else that wants to be late. Apologize if I made that more confusing than possible. But basically, you want to look at reactions, look at news events, and then look at reactions in the market. You want to see what has moved the market, what doesn't move the market. And this changes over time. But if you're consistently kind of doing this review, doing this analysis, you can start determining what the market cares about at the moment. And then if you're like me, if you want to put a little bit more extra to it, like I don't know what ISM manufacturing is, but I know that it moved the market, right? So then you start researching, hey, what is ISM manufacturing? Why is it important? How does it relate to inflation and all that fun stuff? And then slowly you start learning about what events mean what, and you start seeing patterns like anything else. And even Anthony Chung said this when he came on at our recent workshop that he's looked at as a financial expert, but really he didn't start off like that. He just slowly kind of put different bits of knowledge in his head and understood more of the relationship that news and reactions and crowd psychology have to the market. Understood that more so than the actual details of the specific news event. So that's my philosophy for anyone out there that wants to learn about news. I've been talking for like 8 minutes, so it's like a podcast in its own right. But I do want to share with you kind of the clip from the live room where we talked about this during the day. Before the dollar dump off. So it looks like dollar, see, here's the interesting thing, right? So we're seeing these dollar pairs moving down, right? You would say dollar strength, right? But if it were dollar strength, right? Then the dollar yen would be moving up. The dollar yen also moved down, right? Which is so has other yen pairs, right? 'Cause I'm looking at euro yen right now. So it could be a flood to the safe havens if yen and dollar are both strong, with the yen being valued more so than the dollar, given how that pair is moving. So it could be nothing to do with the yen at all or the dollar. It could be something else in Europe, Australia, who knows? We do have ISM numbers coming out as well for the dollar in about 5 minutes. There are still ways to go in EU-UK talks. EU team member cited by Reuters says both sides committed to getting a deal. Cannot guarantee there will be a deal in the end. It says significant divergence remains, but both sides are working hard. The outcome is uncertain. Cable looks like it made up his mind, but that might be a false signal because it's all about a weak dollar. Euro pound isn't breaking out. So it could be cable optimism going the opposite way, right? We've seen good pushes in the pound lately. It could be with this new statement coming out. The big push is now happening in Brexit talks. Hold on. EU negotiation late last night said, I'm told, big push. EU sources predict bulk of outstanding work on deal could be done in the next 24 hours, but that's fine tuning, could be a few more days. It seems like it could be a shift with this latest statement. So here's what it looks like. Here's the conclusion I would make from the news, right? It looked like there was a lot of positivity going into a deal being made. And it said EU sources predict that the bulk of outstanding work on the deal could be done in the next 24 hours, but that fine tuning can take a few more days, right? So you got that news coming out. Let's mark that down as positive for a deal being made. Then you got a member coming out this morning and basically saying both sides are committed to getting the deal, but they cannot guarantee there will be a deal at the end, which is kind of you're stepping back your words. They say significant divergences. Significant, that's a big word. Significant divergences remain, but both sides are working hard. So you have a flood of positive news coming in, right? You have a flood of positive news coming in, and then it's a stepping back of that news. So if people are bailing on positions due to a stepping back of that news, we talked about this earlier, right? If you're bailing on positions, where are you gonna put your money to? Your money's gonna flood to your safe havens, right? What are your two safe havens? The dollar and the yen, right? Number one is gonna be the dollar. If you're fearful against the dollar, number two is gonna be the yen. I don't think it's any surprise we're seeing both the yen and the dollar pairs strengthen. You're welcome. Does that make sense, though? I sound like a fundamental expert, man. Who would have ever thought? No, I am not fundamental savvy by any means, guys. But I pay attention to stuff, and over the years, stuff gets stuck in your brain. Anthony Chung said the same thing. He talked about how he's looked at as this fundamental expert. He didn't know all of this stuff at once. He learned it on the way, right? And it sticks with you, and you see common themes. So it's less about the actual news. I can tell you nothing about the Brexit deal. I can tell you absolutely nothing, aside from the fact that Gabby may not be able to ship her chocolates. That's about it, right? But I can tell you the relationships. Nor can Boris. I can tell you the relationships, right? I can make relationships between it. And if you think about it as what we just did as just being relationships, right? You had positive news come out. Let's put it like this. You had positive news come out. Positive news caused a specific action in the market. So you can make that correlation. This news of deal being done caused the market to do this, right? So you can now you know in your head, if this happens, then this is the reaction. If this happens, then this is the reaction. If this happens, then this is the reaction. Then you had a stepping back of that positive news, right? So you can call that negative news. And then you see a reaction off of that. If this happens, then that happens. If this happens, then that happens. And then you put two and two together just with again, knowledge of kind of risk on, risk off stuff. And you see these other pairs moving with no news coming out about it. Nothing came out for the dollar, nothing came out for the yen. So it had to be caused by something else. And then you can just build those relationships. And if you understand those relationships, you can do the same thing in the future with different news. It could be I'm trying to think what the California exit would be called here in the U.S. The Clegsit. I don't know. The Clegsit. But it's more about relationships than the specifics of the news. You can always read about the specifics of the news. That's what I do. I just read articles. I'm like, oh, I didn't know what that word meant. But if you can understand the relationships, that's key. And that was my gift when I was a stock investor. My mentor's whole approach was understand relationships, right? You don't need to know how to read a financial spreadsheet and all that stuff. You need to know if a company is strong or weak, obviously, but you don't need to go into the details, right? Read relationships. And if you can understand relationships and understand, and when I say relationships, understanding kind of news and human reaction to news, you're going to be able to put yourself in some good position.